Radio TV phono nut here, and we can't let Shango have all the fun with the transistor radio, so let's see what we can do about this one. This is an Electro Brand, and based on the MC and KC markings on the dial, I'd say this is probably from the late 60s, maybe very early 70s, because at that point they went to MHZ and KHZ. The person who owns this would like to get it fixed if possible. It's got some sentimental attachment, and believe it or not, we actually had a radio like this whenever I was a kid. It was Dad's workshop radio, and it worked okay. It really wasn't anything spectacular, but it worked okay, and then it got to the point it wasn't working okay, so he gave it to me to do whatever I wanted to with it, and I seem to remember overvolting it to see how far it would go before something popped in it, and I think we got to about 18 volts before an electrolytic popped its guts, and then that was the end of it. Now, he says this radio has very weak audio, and the battery contacts are not in great shape, but he's not concerned about that as long as he can plug it into an AC outlet. That's all he cares about. So this has got AM, FM, shortwave, the aircraft band, and PB. I guess that's the old police band. I don't think there's very much on those frequencies anymore. Alright, here we are opened up, and I already see one problem. This capacitor is bloated on top, and that shouldn't be. There's probably going to be a whole lot more bad capacitors in here as well. Okay, Pioneer speaker, which looks to have a 7th week of 69 date code on it. Looks like we have a mix of germanium and silicon transistors. Seem to remember one that Shango did recently being that way. Alright, let's go plug it up and see what happens. Okay, power on. Getting a very minute bit of static from the speaker.
Weekend Q is on. Today's best music, Q101.
Okay, so we indeed have weak audio on FM. And that's with it wide open. Alright, let's try AM. Okay, AM is louder, but still not what it should be. Very distorted.
WMER. In-store and online at Dollar Shave Club. That's DollarShaveClub.com. Welcome to the club.
I have an idea this is going to have multiple problems. I feel like there's an issue in the audio output stage and probably an issue in the FM front end too. Just for the heck of it, anything on shortwave. Yeah, a little something, but not much. What about the aircraft band? Not really much of nothing there either. Your low IQ station playing low IQ music from low IQ people. Okay, that bloated capacitor looks to be the main filter cap. We'll go ahead and change that while we're at it, and then we'll get into tracking down why the audio is lousy, and also the lousy FM reception needs to be corrected. Now I'm going to start jumping some capacitors, these small value capacitors with this big 5 microfarad film cap. Well, when I jump that one, it gets a little louder, so that one's bad. Alright, 30 microfarad, 6 volts, Electro Brand. Yeah, I think we've got a bar here that's called the Echo. I don't think it's one of the higher end establishments though, kind of like this capacitor. Alright, we'll just change that with a 33 microfarad 50 volt capacitor that will be about the same size as this 6 volt capacitor. Alright, that's a bit louder now. Well, oddly enough, now on the meter it's showing capacitance, but that could be because I got it so hot with the soldering iron that it temporarily corrected itself. Yeah, the 470 puffed up filter cap is reading 430. Yeah, not too terribly bad on capacitance, but you know, we're going to change it anyway.
Active roster for Tennessee.
Okay, that didn't help much, and I didn't really figure it would, but since it was starting to puff up on top, it needed to go. So now I'm going to start jumping more capacitors. I honestly don't know how far I'm going to go with this radio because, quite frankly, these radios were not meant to be repaired in the first place. I mean, look at all these jumbled up connections and the way wires are running everywhere, and I already had a couple of traces lift on me as I was trying to remove those capacitors, which is common for these types of radios, but you know, most of these types of radios were used until they didn't work anymore, and then they were just meant to be discarded and replaced. But I'm going to do what I can to try to make this thing perform at least somewhat satisfactorily anyway.
To the top of the list.
But to be honest with you, with all of the glue everywhere and all of the rosin flux and no component road mapping on the bottom of the board, it's just honestly hard for me to really see this very well and figure out what's what here. Like I said, I'll get it going as good as I can, and then that's just all we can do. Okay, it really sounds like that.
It doesn't say who the best.
Based on the distorted audio, that half of our push-pull output stage is not working. This transistor here looks like a replacement, and it is wiggling on the circuit board, so yeah, whoever worked on this, and I believe the gentleman who owns this said I believe his uncle had a TV shop or something at one time, so he said he probably worked on this. So I feel like he tried to repair it and possibly gave up on it, and that was... Alright, listen here as I wiggle this transistor.
Have all the thoughts and insights, but
did you hear that?
From 10,000 feet, Charlie Winfield, tell us the difference right now at NC State versus what we saw.
Yeah, we have a poor solder connection, and I can see through the camera this looks like an SK device, so yeah, that's a replacement. So let's fix this bad solder connection, probably another trace that broke loose, and then that should clear up our audio. That'll give us both sides of our push-pull configuration, and then we'll go from there.
NC State.
All right, that's better.
Up from them. They basically had a scrimmage last week. Look at it this way. Louisiana Tech is a much better team right now than South Florida, in my estimation. That's the score I'm looking for. He's always working the airports, finding a spot so she can join us here on...
Okay, I'm on the FM band, which is very lackluster in performance. I'm going to unsolder the antenna lead here and see if it gets any worse. Well, disconnecting the antenna gave me no worse, no better reception, so that tells me that most likely the FM RF amplifier stage isn't working, probably due to a bad transistor, but honestly, I really don't know that I'm up for digging through all this wax, and all of that is behind the tuning condenser pulleys, and I just don't know that it's going to be worth doing all that for something that I could very well end up making the radio worse than it is right now. So we may just end up putting this thing back together, getting it as good as we can get it on AM, and just letting it go. Alright, when I bypass the transistor, with an extra wire for an antenna, my meter probe actually, we get better signal. So yeah, I think that FM RF amp transistor is probably bad, but I just really don't know that it would be feasible to try to dig it out of all of this wax and pulling off the tuning condenser pulleys and messing up the dial strings. So I think we're just going to try to work on getting AM as best we can and sending it, not trying to put the radio down, but Electro Brand was always the lowest of the low end, and I believe they're still around, and they're still the lowest of the low end. So, and I remember the one we had before it finally died completely. It was good enough to pick up the local stations for playing music in the shop, but it wasn't that spectacular of a radio, as I recall. Okay, we're back together. It actually works pretty good on AM.
Really focused Golden Eagle football team here tonight. A third-year freshman, a fourth-year sophomore again. These are some...
Ready? What? 737? What? Like the World Trade? Who are you talking to?
I thought that might have been 670 coming in, but no, the reason this chassis is loose in the cabinet is because the mounting studs, most of the mounting studs are broken from where the radio was serviced in the past, and that's another common problem with these types of radios. The plastic mounting studs become brittle with age, and when you remove the screws or replace the screws, they crack and break, and that's it. Alright, FM will pick up a few of the stronger stations with the volume turned all the way up.
I'm going on during the sun.
But its performance is really not satisfactory. And like I said, I believe the problem is a bad RF amp transistor, but seeing what all it's buried in, all that wax and everything that has to be taken off to get to it, and seeing as how that board is not laid out for easy service, I just really think it's better off left alone, because if I go to try to fix it, I could very well make it worse than it is. So at least right now we have somewhat decent AM. And like I said, these radios were not designed to be serviced in the first place. They were budget models that were sold through discount stores, and most people bought them, used them until they wouldn't play anymore, and then they didn't even think about trying to fix them. They just junked them, and that was that.
Changing landscape. The idea of this dinosaur team remaining independent, is that real?
Now, I'm sure it could stand some more capacitors replaced, but like I said, the way that board is all thrown together and blobbed up, it's just difficult to impossible for me to try to figure out where everything is and get it out without making things possibly worse than they are. So we're just going to send it back home, and at least it's working better than it did when it came in here. So that's that. Alright, here we are on short wave, and you can see me touching the antenna has an effect there, so that just proves that for short wave the antenna is passing a signal. It's just not doing anything for FM, and that's because we likely have a bad RF transistor and no signal is getting through.
Matthew, that is a little more difficult to explain. So let's read. Dig it out.
Rescuing people.
And of course the public service band in FM is basically non-existent.
I've never seen before. Obviously, I don't know anything about Toledo. His name is Daquan.
But that's about all I've got for this one. I think we're ready to send it back where it came from. And speaking of sending it back, I still haven't got my package from Shango or the other two things that FedEx has been holding hostage at the local sort facility, or so tracking says. Calling the 1-800 number is a joke, and the two ladies that worked for FedEx that were actually worth a darn and could get something done have retired. I don't blame them there. But I think the first part of the week I'm going to follow up in the local FedEx terminal and demand my packages and let them know that I'm not leaving until they're handed to me. And I don't want to hear no excuses. If y'all can't deliver what you were paid in good faith to do, then you need to just shut it down. But every day something being on the vehicle for delivery and then not showing up, and then the process repeating itself for several days, is totally unacceptable. But I'll let you know how it turns out. Okay, 2 packages just arrived, but the one from Shango is still missing in action, so they claim it's on the truck. I guess it must have been on a different truck than these two, so we'll give it a couple more days and see what happens. But right now we'll open these up and see what we have on the inside. Okay, so let's see what we have wrapped up here. Okay, this is a Meteor, which was Sears Roebuck's low-end brand for electronics. You don't see too many radios with that name brand, but they do show up occasionally. I think they used it up until the 1950s. Now, what makes this one special is it has no variable tuning control. It's strictly push button only. You pull off this escutcheon here and you set each button for the station you want, and that's your only tuning option. So we have 6 buttons here and an off-on volume control, and that's it. And the chassis looks to be your typical 4-tube TRF variety, and the power cord's obviously been replaced, so someone's messed with this at some point in time, but that'll be a video for another day. And this should be a Newmark turntable. Looks like they packed this one pretty good too. Okay, Newmark belt-driven turntable. The only reason I bought it is because it's cheap, or was cheap. They claim it has no output, either no matter whether you're using the built-in preamp or just directly or bypassing the preamp, so that shouldn't be too hard to fix. They also sold this one under the Ion brand, but the Ion brand was a cheaper one with a plastic platter and no pitch control. This one uses an aluminum platter, and I'm going to try to modify this for 3-speed. And yeah, this belt is about shot. It's stretched and won't stay on here very well, so it means I've got to order 2 of these belts, since I have the ion version that also has a stretched belt. And I see right now why it has no sound. They've got the wrong stylus on here. This is one of those Crosley ceramic cartridge type of needles for the Chuodenshi CZ800 style cartridge, and this is a magnetic cartridge here, and it looks like it's been slid back in its holder, so we're going to have to fix that. But yeah, I think once you put the right stylus on here and fix the cartridge mount back right, I think it'll work okay. Okay, maybe the cartridge body isn't slid back. That's the way it's supposed to be, so yeah, we need 2 belts and 2 styli, so, and that ought to get this turntable and the ion version that I have up to snuff, and now we have a Crosley needle for future use.